Welcome back to How Did You Get In? We're really excited for our guest today, Bethany Rolan, HBS class of 2022, proud member of Section H. She is also a proud UT Austin alum and a big Longhorn fan, but also an expert on all things McKinsey, where she has spent over 5 years professionally, 3 before business school and 2 after business school. Bethany, we're so excited to have you on the pod. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So, would love to jump in by hearing more about what you were up to before business school, a little bit about your background, where you're from. We mentioned your UT Austin, but what were you doing in undergrad and that led you to your career post undergrad?
Awesome. Yeah. My story starts in Lubbock, Texas, which in Texas is what we call a small town. It's about 250,000 people. And I was born and raised, grew up there, was there through high school, and then found my way to UT Austin for undergrad. I studied supply chain management, economics, and I was in the business honors program at UT, which is also a major. And so spent a lot of time in class, and I was super involved, went to every home football game and was in student organizations and just did the full Texas D1 college experience and loved every second of it. And that's where I was introduced to McKinsey. You know, when you come from Lubbock, there are no Fortune 500 companies. So nobody's parents works at one. There are no hedge funds. There are no consulting firms. And so I don't really even think I knew what business was until I got to college. But then I met older students that had just come back from consulting internships and started asking questions. And I actually did my first internship in supply chain management at Fiat Chrysler in Detroit. And it was fun. But when I saw what people were doing full time after undergrad, I wasn't that excited by the entry level purchasing role. And so started looking around again and thought, why don't I try consulting? So I did a McKinsey internship between my junior and senior year. And after that, I was sold. So I went there after graduation and did what young consultants do, which is work on everything from luxury retail to steel manufacturing to pharmaceuticals. And kind of just tried it all. And then before business school, I did an internal rotation, kind of a secondment opportunity within McKinsey with their global social responsibility group. So I got to help manage charitable giving and pro bono consulting for the firm, which was like a fun bonus experience before going to HBS.
That's amazing. And I love hearing because I think so many people at least where I went to undergrad, they came in knowing what consulting was. And I feel like it gave them such a head start. Because if you don't really figure out what it is until your second or third year, it's like you got to play catch up really quickly. So that's amazing to hear that you got there, you figured it out, you learned from the peers, and then you found something that you thought was interesting to get to test. I'm curious, in your time at McKinsey, at what point did the idea of an MBA come into your mind?
So it was actually long before that. My mom is a professor, and my dad teaches at a medical school and runs a residency program. And so, like, education and growing up in academia was just very present for me. And so I often joked that me going straight to work out of undergrad made me like the least educated person in my family. And so I always had this idea that like, well, everyone goes to grad school, I think. And it was actually during undergrad that I learned, hey, these consulting companies will actually pay your tuition to get an MBA. And so that was a super attractive idea to me. So actually from day one, that was part of the plan, was to kind of see if I could get McKinsey to pay for it.
And so were you one of those really ahead of the ball, studied for your GMAT while you were still in undergrad type?
I did. That was the one piece of advice that I got after my McKinsey internship was like, hey, if you're thinking about this at all, you should take the GMAT while you're in study mode. And so I took a GMAT class in Austin my last semester, and then I scheduled the test during finals week. So it just felt like another final at the end of the semester.
That's a little bit of a glutton for punishment to schedule that during finals week. That's a whole different level. But I guess like you were in the zone.
Exactly. It was like I was taking all these other tests and I took it once and that was it. So it was over quickly.
You were talking to 2 people who had to take it 3 times a piece, and neither of us did that. So everyone listen to Bethany, take it in undergrad, just get it done with, because you don't get smarter the further out you get. You get worse at studying.
Worse at studying and the time. Like I now people at work come and ask me like, how did you do this? And I kind of have to say, well, I didn't. And here's what I've seen other people do, but it does sound really hard and I'm sorry.
You almost have to ask to be beached so you can take the GMAT.
I mean, truly, I tell people like just take a 4 or 5 week leave of absence and just treat it like a full-time job.
Yeah, I mean, not, that I feel like you kind of need to if you're working those types of hours. Great advice, I would say. So you were 3 years at McKinsey before business school. How did you know that that was the right time?
That's a great question. I didn't have a scientific answer for sure. I knew that we have at McKinsey 3rd year opportunities. Like I said, I spent 9 months with the global social responsibility team. And so I think a lot of it was I wanted to take advantage of one of those 3rd year opportunities. So that's what took it from 2 years to 3 years versus the classic like 2 years of consulting. And then after that, it was more that I knew consulting was not the end game for me. I did not want to be a partner at McKinsey. And so it felt like every year I was going to stay was just going to extend my total consulting time because I knew I was going to have to come back after MBA. And so I just thought, let's make it sooner rather than later.
Well, you mentioned, obviously, I think when people go into consulting at the beginning, you do a smattering of things. In the course of those 3 years, did you start to have a certain kind of focus? And did you go to business school having developed an industry or a size of company or something, some hypothesis about what you wanted to go deeper in based on your consulting experience? Or was it like, nope, I just want to pivot and get exposure to more things?
I think it was largely the latter. I had spent about my last year in B2B marketing and sales and using like heavy analytics, like all the buzzwords of machine learning and optimization and all that stuff to apply to B2B sales organizations, which, and I was shocked to learn this, but most B2B organizations still like you call someone to order something. There's no website, like there's no, and so there was a lot of ground to cover when we were like, we're going to do machine learning on your pricing algorithms. And so I loved that. And I definitely wanted to explore more like using data to drive decision making in a variety of insights. And then I was also sort of looking to merge this, I had just spent some time doing corporate social responsibility and looking into pro bono and charitable giving. And so I had this idea of like, how can corporations be a force for good? And so I think my initial hypothesis on business school was like figuring out how to merge those two, how to like do something that I felt like made a difference in the world and use data to do it. I sort of through MBA, as many people do, pivoted and found new things to be excited about. But that's what I was thinking going in.
I feel like there's debate about whether or not you need an MBA to continue to succeed at a place like McKinsey, where it's a great stepping stone. It's a great network. You can get a lot of great jobs and not have to. And granted, yes, you have the option of McKinsey paying, but it's still 2 years where you're not making an income. What is
they don't buy you dinner. They just pay for the school part. Yeah. So it's still expensive. Yeah.
Yes, your living expenses are still very much on you. Just curious your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think it's a super personal choice because I have absolutely seen people succeed inside and outside of McKinsey without an MBA. I don't think it's as required as it was a decade ago. And so what I kind of tell people is depends on what the end goal is if your goal is making partner at McKinsey as quickly as possible, probably not like a necessary thing to do. If you want to exit to, something that a McKinsey client or you want to leverage your McKinsey connections to exit, probably not. For me, it was a lot about just the pure education and reflection of it, of like broadening my experiences, living in a different part of the country, meeting new people. I didn't even feel like I knew what all the options post McKinsey were. And so I kind of wanted to just explore and just like take a minute after a very intense first 3 years of my career and like reflect and learn. I always loved school. My family really values education. So for me, it was a lot more about that. But I think it's a totally personal choice because no, on paper, you don't need it. For me, I think it will serve me for the rest of my career. Just getting an infusion of friends in your late 20s is pretty cool. And when those friends can also like explain industry topics to you or help you think about your career, even better. I met professors that I stay in touch with. So like, I'm very confident, glad I went and confident that it will serve me for the next 30 years. But did I need it? No.
Yeah, it is a highly personal decision. And it's a really personal journey as you're going into and thinking about your narrative and how you're going to make a compelling application. Tell us a little bit, like, what was your core thesis or your narrative in your application? What did you say you wanted to go to business school to do? How did you come to that narrative and that thread?
This was the thing that I was most nervous about through the whole application process because I didn't have like a specific end goal in mind. I felt like other people were being like, I'm going to have this position at this company, or I'm going to start a company that does this exact, here's the value prop. And I did not have that at all. I talked about the type of leader that I wanted to be using data and companies that were a bit more mission driven or just thinking about how their for-profit business could be a driver for good in the world. So kind of like the role that I wanted to play in companies. And I talked about how much I loved data and was a total nerd. So that was kind of the end goal that I talked about. And I was nervous about it because it was a little fuzzier than some of the other things that I heard. And then I also talked a lot about just what I had done up to that point to get myself on the path to that vision. So like putting myself in all these, even though I don't have a technical undergrad, putting myself in all these heavy analytics studies and learning that and working with data scientists and taking this opportunity to do 9 months with global social responsibility to understand how a really large company thinks about their impact. And so kind of showing like, this is real, I am investing in myself along this journey. And then I also talked a lot about just my background in growing up in Lubbock with a single mom and not knowing what consulting was when I stepped onto undergrad, because I think the value, especially of a place like HBS that's all case-based, is the diversity you bring into the room. And in a lot of ways, I was not diverse. Like I'm a white woman from McKinsey. Like it's not that, but I thought like, no, but actually like working, being very comfortable consulting in factories and having lived in an agricultural area of the country and growing up in a 2-person household, like those were unique experiences that I could bring. And so I talked about that as well.
And it sounds, yeah, even if you didn't know, like, oh, I want this exact job, I think even just showing, like, hey, I'm having an inkling of something that really interests me, and I've already started to do things to help prep me for that, even if I don't know, oh, I want to be the director of data analytics at XYZ company. I at least, am passionate about solving problems using data. So I think you definitely had enough focus and enough of a vision. And I personally didn't say like what my exact job would be like post MBA as well, or like an idea of an exact job. So but I think showing the focus and the passion is goes a long way for sure. How did you consider an admissions consultant, or like how did you help narrow down your final narrative?
Yeah, I did consider it. And I met with a couple, did like intro calls and told them gave them my resume and told them where I was planning to apply. But at the end of the day, I was like, this is a very expensive thing that I'm about to go do, if anybody will let me do it. And so I just could not get my head around like the initial expense. And so I didn't. I did the DIY version, I call it. But I was very lucky in that McKinsey, there's lots of folks that have been to business school. And so I was very lucky in that I could sort of ask mentors, and I did, to just tell me about their experiences. And then for a select few to actually read my essays and give comments and, practice interviews with me and write letters. And so I just utilized my network to kind of, write 18 versions of the same essay iteratively and kind of hone down the narrative into something that made sense.
And how did you manage? I mean, it sounds like you were thoughtful about the group, but was the feedback that you got pretty consistent from everyone, or was it varied? And how did you manage the different inputs? Because I find that always like an interesting challenge of how do you get enough people to share that you really think you have a solid basis in reality, but not so many that you're confused?
Yes. Oh, yes. And I think I batched them for that exact reason, because if there's one thing you learn in consulting, if too many people are commenting on your PowerPoint, things will go awry. And so I sort of applied that same thing where at first I just talked to a lot of people. I would just be like, can I grab 20, 30 minutes? Can I get you coffee? Like, just tell me about how specifically applications. How did you think about it? What was kind of your narrative? And then I had a couple like close friends that were like, oh, you can just read my essay. So that was really helpful before I even started drafting. And then when I started drafting, I would send it to like 2 people at a time. And I kind of like, and for me, a lot of it was seniority. Like I kind of wanted to wait for the most senior folks just to save them time, right? Of like, I want them to get the best version. And so I kind of sent it to 2 people at a time. And it's how I managed. But because, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, and unlike work, when you have conflicting opinions about your own personal statement, it's like a little more personal. And so I remember fretting over like, well, whose comment do I take? Or I actually like don't agree. That's my favorite sentence. I'm not going to take it out. And so at the end of the day, like it is a judgment call. But yeah, I never sent it to 6 people at once.
Yeah. And I feel like also you had mentioned sending it to like a best friend. I did the same thing where it's a gut check to like, does this sound like me? And then another friend I had who was like an English major, and she's like the gut check of like, is this grammatically like the best written like thing that I can put together? And then, people who could help with like, okay, who went to business school and were like, okay, yep, this is like can validate the narrative and stuff. So if you source a lot of input, make sure to your point, you kind of like digest what input you take and be intentional about it for sure. So I am also curious about your recommendations, especially at McKinsey, where, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have a direct manager. So how do you go about choosing like who should be your recommenders?
Yeah. So I thought about, because we don't have a direct manager, and a lot of times you just work with people for a couple of months. And so that was tricky. And I think another reason why a third year was helpful, just to like give me some more time to build relationships. But I ended up picking a partner and a senior partner at McKinsey that I had, one that I had worked with super closely on actual client work, and another that I had worked with super closely on sort of McKinsey extracurriculars and the things I was doing with recruiting and office building, because I was just super involved outside of the client work. And I made sure that was for HBS. I had like slightly different groups for each school, because I made sure I had an alum be one of the recommenders for each school. I don't know if that actually helped, but in my mind it did. And so that's how I did it. I thought about, who am I close to, who can actually speak to me at work, but also me as a human, because I felt like that's what I was applying with too, was just trying to be really real and a whole person, and talking about all the parts of myself. And so that's how I started. And then I made them probably like more than they needed or even read, but I made them packets of like, here's the narrative I'm trying to follow. Here's how we've worked together, and how if you want to talk about this, I like didn't draft anything, but just bullet points of like, I'm talking a lot about data analytics. Remember, we did these 3 heavy data analytics projects. Like those could be, helpful fodder to talk about. Here's a draft of my essay. Here's the resume. So I kind of made them, here's the deadline. The cover sheet was like the deadlines and the process and the links. And so I made them recommender packets. And I also nudged, because McKinsey is such a close network, I like nudged a couple for the most senior guy, someone that he worked with closely, to read it for him, because I wasn't reading them, but I was like, hey, this person is writing my letter. If you wanted to like be second eyes on it, I think that would be great. And luckily she said, oh yeah, I'll ask him. We'll work on it together.
So many things in there that are so smart. Like, set your recommenders up for success, because by setting them up to be successful, you're going to be successful. So don't make them like go back in the treasure troves of their memory of like the details. Like, give them the details. Let that help them sort of inspire and remind them, well, I totally forgot like how good Bethany was at this one thing, or like that deliverable is what came out of it. Because everyone's got their own sort of like look back, and many projects probably that they've worked at McKinsey. So I think that recommender packet is excellent advice. I'm curious, if you had to go back and do anything differently for your application, what would you do over or do differently?
Honestly, it's hard to say, because I got in and thrilled to pieces. So hard to say. I think it worked out well. It was really great to use my network to give me feedback, because it just felt really personal. And so, yeah, I can't think of anything. It's a written process, so it felt pretty straightforward to me.
Obviously you ended up at HBS. What were the other schools that you applied to and what ended up making you decide on HBS specifically?
I applied to GSB, Wharton, and HBS, which is the classic like consulting trifecta. And I a little bit was tempting fate, right? Like I knew that was a very narrow set. And I was kind of at this point where, like I said, I had decided consulting is not a forever career. So I think I was a little bit tempting the universe of like, okay, these are the places that I'd be really excited to go. So let's try it. And then if it doesn't work out at any of the three, this will be my nudge to leave consulting and either delay the MBA or not do it. So that was sort of how I thought about it. So it was a little bit intentionally narrow. And I went through the process and I was admitted to Wharton and HBS. And so then that was the decision point. And I had initially planned to do admitted students weekends wherever I got in and kind of use that to help. That was really helpful in my undergrad process, was just the gut feel of like, who do I want to hang out with? Like, who do I click with? So that was the plan. But I was admitted in the spring of 2020. And so admitted students weekends were online and like, I don't know, I listened to a couple of panels, but just like it wasn't giving me the feedback. So it was really just a gut decision on who to like a lot of alums that I knew at work and kind of thinking of who do I want to be most like. And it was not assigned to, I did not have a spreadsheet or pros cons list. It was kind of just at the end of the day, this felt right.
The universe said, just go with your gut. You don't have the choice. Yeah, it's tricky, but obviously, I mean, it sounds like you had an amazing experience, and we'd love to hear a little bit. Like, can you share one or two highlights of the business school experience, whether it was a classroom experience, out of the classroom experience that stands out to you as a hallmark of your HBS time?
Gosh, I'm like, let's talk about 12. I think classroom for sure. I took a managing service operations class, which is a very boring title for a very lovely class with Ryan Buell. I love and continues to be like a sounding board for me. And it really just changed the way that I thought about what I wanted and kind of my thesis. I had been struggling, as I talked about, of like, is it for profit, nonprofit, social impact? Like I knew I wanted to make some sort of difference, but that class really helped crystallize for me what I think I had been wrestling with is I'm a for-profit girl. I like a target, but there you can still have a really people-focused impact through service businesses. And so I just sort of like fell in love and it really like changed the way I think about my career. So that was definitely the classroom highlight for sure. And then the out of classroom highlights, I mean, just the small groups. And again, this was part of the fact that my first year was pretty COVID-y, but I actually think it worked out really well for me because we got to do things like, small board game nights. We like when classes were still virtual, me and 7 other women rented a house in Cape Cod and like just posted up for a week and just all got to hang out and like those just really deep relationships and getting to talk to people about what they're excited about, what they did, just the exploration of both the career side, but also just the personal side of like making actual friends was really fun.
Julie and I also did a girls' weekend Airbnb up in Maine. So yeah, all the good New England getaways during COVID. I totally feel that.
Yes, and honestly, kind of nice because we were so limited. I think like if it hadn't been COVID, we probably would have done the getaways, but they might have been more travel complex. And there's something nice about like you have no choice, like just go hang out, go hiking.
Completely. We literally, I think we had missed our, like, you had your winter formal and then like a spring kind of thing. And so I remember we like brought our dresses that we would have worn to the spring thing and to a Maine night and did like a dress up night, just kind of drinking and playing drinking games, but like informal dresses. It was great. It was great.
We were also boiling lobster in formal dresses too.
That is so fun.
So I am curious, are there any myths or misconceptions about HBS that you think people should be aware of?
Well, I think this was like a myth that was maybe truer than I thought it was, is that it is the most academic. I think I was envisioning that as like a on the margins thing, but now that I've had friends go through other programs, like they are real serious about the school up there. Everybody goes to class. Everyone is prepared. They assign more than is humanly possible to do, one girl's opinion. But I did not know that going in. And so it took me some time to kind of adjust and realize that like this I could not approach this like undergrad where I just did every piece of assigned reading and every piece of study, like, because I was just total after doing that for the first few weeks, I was like, wait, I have no or anything else. This was not the business school that I was sold. Like I thought this was going to be fun. And so I kind of had to like readjust, but and I think that was great. Like I would choose it again. I'm a total nerd, but I think it is very different and they're very serious about the classroom and the academic side of it.
Definitely. And it's part of the beauty of it. I think like you can make your journey your own. There are people who did study for every case like it was their job and that was what they wanted to do. And there are people who are maybe more like Alex and I who are more interested in going to the 80s night themed party and maybe not reading the case quite as thoroughly as we needed to. But both experiences are valid and maybe one was more fun and one learned more. So now you mentioned you're in Houston now. Do you keep in touch with the HBS community? What does that look like for you?
Oh, yes. It's been great. I have had for 2 years now, we have the Houston Rodeo, which is like a giant fair plus rodeo plus country concert. And since we graduated every year, so we've done it twice now, I've had a group of HBS friends, like 6 or 8 people come and we all wear matching cowboy hats and we do a day at the rodeo and a weekend in Houston. And a lot of these people have never been to Texas and certainly never like pet a cow. And so it's been like such fun to watch.
Sign me up for next year. I'm ready.
Yes, come on down. So that's been a blast. I've done some girls' weekends too. Every time I'm in New York, it's so fun because I have a ton of people to see and couch surf and meet up with, which is fun. I have been to weddings and engagement parties and yes, so and I feel lucky too. One of my closest section mates actually lives in a suburb of Houston, which is fun. So I get to see her fairly regularly, which I wasn't expecting when I made the decision to move to Houston. I figured that I would have to travel quite a lot. But no, I feel still very connected. And also the HBS Club of Houston, I go to their events when I travel so much for work that it's hard, but I've been to a few. That's nice too, because it's just another way to meet people in Houston and get more connected in Houston.
Awesome. Yeah, I personally haven't been, but now I think I need to go to the rodeo and other events. Although I have pet many cows before, so
I want to go so badly. My husband is from Calgary, and so we went to Stampede and did the rodeo like the Calgary Stampede and rodeo, which was great. But I've heard Houston is like a different level.
Yes, because the rodeo is a cool but small part of it. Like it's also a fair and a shopping experience and like an agricultural, like a billboard for Texas agriculture. So yes, come on down.
So I know before business school, it was kind of like, okay, first a couple years at McKinsey, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything. Have you been able to focus in on more of a niche in the last 2 years? And then just curious where you see yourself going next.
Yes, since I got back from business school, I have focused completely in the people and organizational performance, as we call it, space. So everything from org design, big culture and change, some DE&I, anything that has to do with the people side of the business and like the how you run your business. And so that's been really meaningful because I think that's something that I figured out at business school was I feel a lot of purpose with the people. And so I think I wanted to work on, people spend the most of their time at work. And so how can we make that a positive experience that then makes them a more fulfilled, more developed, happier person in the rest of their life? That's what gets me really excited. And so I've been able to focus on that across industries, but just functionally. And it's been fun. And then what comes next is a great question. I have long been saying that I'm an operator at heart, and so I think for me it's going to be something pretty hands-on, pretty directly related to the P&L. We often say in consulting that we're coaching, we're on the sidelines, we're not playing the game, and I think I would like the ball is as kind of how I describe the next step. I would like to go and get some operational experience. And then this is the most cliche HBS thing to say, but maybe in 5-10 years, do like a self-funded search. And so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Amazing. Well, when you're ready to do the self-funded search, Tyrell and Bob will be excited to share all of their thoughts. And I really like the analogy of, like it's time to get the ball. I think that's how a lot of us also felt after business school, even where it's like you're even step further away removed than in McKinsey, where you're certainly coaching, but you're closer to it. But you're Monday morning quarterbacking, to continue the sports analogy. In every case you read at HBS, you're analyzing like, how did they do? What would I have done different? And then by the time you get out, you're like, all right, put me in. I'm ready. So I really love that. I love that analogy. As we wrap up, I'm curious to hear, looking back on either your experience in applying or at your time while at HBS, do you have any advice for potential students?
Yes, I think being really crystal clear on what you want out of the experience is helpful, even if that is like relationships or to have a fun time or, no judgment on what it is, but just what are the three priorities, because it comes at you like a bus and there is so much to do every day that, like, every day you're having to make a trade-off between, do I go to this dinner on this trip, or do I go see this really cool speaker, or do I like study a little harder for this class that I'm super interested in or want to get close to the professor? Like, you're constantly having to choose between that. It's just so busy. And so having that clarity on what you want out of it so that you can make those trade-offs in the moment, I think is important. And then also just, I think a lot of folks come from intense careers. And so also, how do you use it to like invest in yourself and your health? Like, someone once told me, and it just hit me in my heart, that like, you won't remember this project that you're up until 3 a.m. working on, but your body will remember in 50 years that you did this. And I was like, oh, like, and so I think just figuring out like, what are the like healthier habits, or the rest, or the going to the gym, or whatever, because I do think like we're really good. The classic HBSer is really good at focusing on the job and forgetting the body a little bit.
No, that piece of advice hit hard. That hit home. That
Yes.
hit hard. Oh boy, I'm going to be thinking about that one for a
Yep.
while now.
Yep.
It's a good reminder. It's true. Even if you don't decide to apply, that's probably good advice for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, perfect place to end it. Thank you so much, Bethany. This was really awesome. And we really appreciated all of your great insights. And you gave people a lot of good application advice and just general life advice, especially with that last comment. So really appreciate you taking the time.
Incredibly methodical and thoughtful about it, but in a way that's like approach. Sometimes people have a method to their application where you're like, oh my gosh, that is so intimidating. I couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. But I feel like the way you described it's like people can take elements of that, of like batching the feedback, being thoughtful, getting the GMAT out of the way early. And then I would be remiss to not highlight, like, yeah, the come from a traditional background, but leaning into the non-traditional sides, the stuff that sets you apart and that makes you distinctly you, as opposed to the stuff that makes you a McKinsey consultant. So yeah, echo Alex, amazing to hear and to get to meet you and learn more about you. And we're so grateful to have had the time with you.
Thank you. Likewise, this has been fun.